Sometimes we're so weighed down when we wake up in the morning. We feel so depressed. We don't have any motivation to get out of bed. Or maybe we've woken up from a dream about the person who hurt us. When you keep waking up like that after a number of years, eventually you start thinking to yourself, my God, what happened to me? What happened to my life? My life has been full of struggle and misery this whole time. How long have I been living with this problem? It could have been better. That thing shouldn't have happened. It could have been avoided. My life is ruined. And we get very fixated and attached to the negative story we've created. And that's not surprising because the human condition is predisposed for desire. We are in fact idealists and hedonists by nature. We are not intrinsically stoic or ascetic. Most of us don't go out looking to struggle in painful situations so that we can train ourselves to become more resilient. We would prefer to have everything in the world. At the very least, we would prefer that everything were in place, just right and nearly perfect. But that's one of our problems. We don't know how to receive suffering. And we always think that suffering is a bad thing, but it's not. Another thing we should consider is just how much awareness we have about the things that are going on in this planet. Are we putting things into perspective? Because if you look around and really pay attention to the things that are happening to people, not just in second and third world countries, but right here at home, you will see the reality. The reality is that in this day and age, suffering is more pervasive than it ever has been. So we may be able to create that perfect life that we want, the most ideal thing that we've dreamt of, but usually not without having to go through something very difficult like child abuse in the process. These things are happening more and more over the century because that is the karma of our planet right now. It's been getting worse since the 1950s. So likewise, our quality of life has been in decline. Ever since industrialization, ever since internet pornography. If you pay attention and look around, it doesn't take long before you notice how pervasive suffering is. It's in the lyrics of all the music we hear. Just refer to the lyrics of so much modern rock music and a lot of rap music and some big names, for example, bands like Bring Me the Horizon and Korn. But if you pay attention to the lyrics of some of these singers, Jonathan Davis, for example, was physically abused, sexually assaulted at a very early age, and bullied in school. So his ordeals were so heavy that he founded his entire career on that, on his suffering. That's all he writes about. These people have had some of the worst psychological health in spite of their material fame and success. Who do you know is suffering right now? Every second person you meet has been through at least one great thing that completely overwhelmed them. 1 in 4 people in North America regularly experience acute anxiety and panic attacks and take prescription medication for it. And that same ratio applies to depression too. How many people do you know have chronic irritable bowel syndrome or get migraines regularly? All the pain we see in this world is supposed to happen, and that's because we are at that time. If you read books like The Aquarian Message or The Doomed Aryan Race by Samael Aun-Weor, it all comes together. And of course, there's much more information from other sources and statistics on how things are truly declining in spite of what we might think and see. So let's face the reality. You're not alone. When we're young, a trauma might happen to us, and at first we may not understand it, or we might think that we can handle it, that we can just let it go. But then your mind dwells on the events, and later on, you realize what happened, but it's too late to turn back. So the trauma grows heavier and heavier as you realize that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something about it, to stand up for yourself for once, to fight back, to use your voice. But you didn't. You hesitated. When you go through something horrible like child abuse or sexual abuse, or something overwhelming like bullying or a terrible betrayal or cheating, tradition says that you're supposed to speak out, to fight back, to take revenge. And so we learn this, and when we fail to do that, we suffer even more. For us, it's just too much to handle, too much to let go at once. This is what life is like without proper holistic healing practices for the mind. These are not just everyday inconveniences and conflicts or arguments. These are major traumas. They last a long time. They're not easy to let go. And the longer you hold on, the harder it is to let go. But the good news is there is a solution. There is, in fact, one great benefit and necessity to suffering, and that is spiritual growth. Nobody wants to undergo trauma. Nobody wants to admit that they carry a miserable past that ruined their childhood for almost a decade. But remember, the only way to progress spiritually, the only way to grow the conscience is to remove the conditioning that it carries. That process is always painful. Any creature or soul with a conditioned mind, with the ego, carries karma. And when we pay that karma, we do so through suffering and inconveniences. But this is something we should be grateful for. The Buddha said that all pain comes from desire, and all happiness comes from serving others. And for many lifetimes, we have put energy into motion by feeding desire. So we are feeling the consequences of our previous actions. But we are doing ourselves good when we are present for those impressions and inconveniences, when we don't fight them. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, interviewed a monk one time who was exiled from Tibet after the Chinese had invaded. He was imprisoned for 15 years and beaten and tortured. He went through the troubles and traumas of that time and place. So the Dalai Lama asked, what was the greatest danger when you were in prison? And the monk's response was, losing my compassion for the Chinese. So you can imagine how devoted he was to maintaining love and compassion for others in such a treacherous time of his life. And somewhere in the interview, Dalai Lama said to the monk that it would have been easier to practice in that prison than it is to practice here at home at the meditation retreat, because he had something to meditate on, and it was fresh in his mind. When I first began meditating on my youth trauma, after a few insights, Tara, my intuition, told me through dream text that the consciousness needs something to feel. So she affirmed this idea of needing to suffer in order to grow the conscience, to reduce its conditioning. And Master Samael explained a similar thing. He says in one of his books, a mind that is at service of one's real being is, or rather results in an effective instrument. The mind is made to be receptive, not as an active instrument. If someone hurts us, we must not permit the mind to react. Wish that there will always be someone who can hurt us in our feelings daily, So that way we can train our mind better to be passive. The more insults we receive, the better for our training. Keep in mind that the pain of paying karma doesn't last very long when you compare it to the millions of lives you've already lived. And enlightenment can be attained in one life, after all. The worst ordeals and karma that we receive happens in the formative years, between childhood and teenagehood. You're watching this video because you already went through the pain of childhood trauma. And that's one of the worst experiences most people can go through these days in the West. So now that you're almost past that, it's just a matter of digesting those impressions from the past so you can move forward again. We all have to work on ourselves at some point. How can you work on your pride if you've been feeding it your whole life and can't remember any times when you didn't stand up for yourself or embarrass yourself? How can you work on your sorrow and grief if you've never failed miserably at something or lost a loved one? So meditation is the right thing to do. It is the proper way to heal the mind. It is the way our mind was intended to function, with serenity and alertness.